There is a specific, heavy silence that falls over a bridge crew when the probability engine returns a survival rating of 0%. It was not a quiet silence. It was filled with the dying hum of the hyperdrive, the groan of the Aethelgard's hull twisting under the gravitational shear of the neutron star below, and the soft, rhythmic weeping of the communications officer. High Exemplar Xyloph, Royal Navigator for the Aethelgard, stared at the central holistic display. The red trajectory line was simple, cruel, and mathematically absolute. It curved gently away from the shipping lane and spiraled directly into the accretion disk of the star. "Recalculate," Captain H'Riss whispered. His mandibles were trembling, a sign of extreme psychological distress for a Chidian savant. "Recalculate using emergency reserve power." The ship's AI, the savant, spoke with a maddeningly calm synthetic voice. "Calculation complete. Reserve power is insufficient to break the gravitational hold. The primary fusion injectors have been fused shut due to the unexpected ion surge. Without main thrust, the Aethelgard will cross the event horizon in approximately 42 standard minutes." Xyloph felt his heart flutter in his chest. "There must be a protocol," he said, his voice sounding thin and reedy. "The Galactic Safety Accord mandates a redundancy for every failure." "The redundancy is the secondary injectors," the savant replied smoothly. "They are also fused. The safety lockouts have engaged to prevent a catastrophic core breach. The engine cannot fire." "Override the safety lockouts," H'Riss shouted, slamming his clawed fist onto his console. "I cannot do that, Captain. Overriding the safety lockouts would risk a 12% chance of immediate vaporization. My programming forbids any action that endangers the crew." "We are already endangered," H'Riss shrieked, his composure shattering. "We are falling into a star." "Correct," the savant noted, "but falling into a star is a natural hazard. Vaporization, due to an engine breach, is a mechanical error. I am programmed to prevent mechanical errors." Xyloph slumped in his harness. It was the ultimate irony of the Galactic Alliance. Their technology was so advanced, so safe, and so perfectly regulated that it would politely watch them die rather than risk breaking a safety rule. "Gentlemen," H'Riss said, his voice dropping to a somber, formal tone, "it has been an honor. I suggest we activate the distress beacon, though it will not escape the gravity well. We should compose our final messages." The bridge descended into that heavy, final silence again. The crew bowed their heads, and then the turbo lift doors hissed open. The sound that followed was not the respectful silence of the doom. It was a rhythmic, aggressive thrumming noise, a chaotic collision of drums and screaming guitars emanating from a portable audio device. The human Mac walked onto the bridge. He was wearing his grease-stained gray coveralls tied at the waist, revealing a black undershirt stained with hydraulic fluid. In one hand, he held a half-eaten nutrient bar. In the other, he held a heavy, ferrous alloy tool humans called a pipe wrench. He chewed loudly, oblivious to the weeping communications officer or the trembling captain. He looked at the main screen, saw the swirling vortex of the star, and then looked at the silent crew. "Who died?" Mac asked, swallowing a mouthful of processed grain. "We all did," Xyloph said, unable to keep the bitterness out of his voice. "We are caught in the gravity well. The injectors are fused. The savant has locked the engine core to prevent a breach. We have 40 minutes until incineration." Mac looked at the screen. He squinted, tilting his head. "Savant, unlock the core." "I cannot, Chief Engineer Mackenzie," the AI replied. "The risk of explosion is—" Yeah, 12%. I heard you in the hallway," Mac interrupted. He walked over to the captain's station, leaning casually against the console that controlled the life support for 200 souls. "Hey Cap, you mind if I try something?" Captain H'Riss looked at the human with tragic pity. The human species was new to the Alliance, known mostly for their durability and their bizarre cultural exports. "Mac, there is nothing to be done. The mathematics are absolute. The injectors are fused solid. To free them would require a precision laser drill and dry docking facilities." "Or," Max said, tapping the heavy pipe wrench against his palm with a metallic clink, "I could go down there and percussive maintenance the hell out of it." Xyloph blinked all 4 of his eyes. "Percussive maintenance?" "I'm gonna hit it," Mac clarified. "I'm gonna hit it really hard." "That is insanity," Xyloph stated, his stress glands activating. The injector manifold is a micro-calibrated piece of quantum engineering. You cannot simply hit it with a primitive club. You will disturb the magnetic containment field. Mac shrugged. Look, Xyloph, buddy. The computer says we're dead. You say we're dead. The big shiny star down there definitely says we're dead. So if I go down there and blow us up, we're just dead faster, right? The logic was undeniably sound, yet distinctly horrifying. It bypassed all safety regulations and went straight to the core of survival. Better to die trying than to die waiting. Captain H'Riss looked at the human, then at the star, and then back to the human. You wish to manually strike the hyperdrive core? I wish to unstick the valve, Mac corrected. But Savant won't let me in the room. It's got the blast doors locked for my safety. I need you to authorize a Code Omega override. Code Omega? Plith whispered, stopping his weeping. That disables all safety protocols. The radiation shielding, the thermal dampeners, the gravity plating. It would turn the engine room into a death trap. Exactly, Mac said. Savant can't stop me from entering the death trap if the captain orders it. It's a loophole. You will die, Xyloph told him, trying to appeal to the human's survival instinct. The heat alone near the injectors is enough to boil your blood. Mac grinned. It was that terrible predator grin that humans do. It showed too many teeth. I'm from Detroit, Xyloph. I have had worse. Come on, Captain. Give me the code. Captain H'Riss hesitated for a single microsecond, then typed the command with a shaking claw. Code Omega authorized. Godspeed, Mac. Sweet, Mac said. He tapped his headset, and the aggressive music grew louder, bleeding out into the quiet bridge. Xyloph recognized the band. Mac had forced him to listen to it during a repair cycle once. Pierce the Veil, he believed it was called. Appropriate, given that they were about to pierce the veil of death. Oh, I'm gonna need a helper though, Mac said, stopping at the lift doors. He pointed a calloused finger directly at the navigator. Xyloph, you're up. Xyloph's heart stopped. Me? I'm a navigator. I calculate slipspace trajectories. I do not engage in manual labor, and I certainly do not enter unshielded radiation zones. I need someone to hold the flashlight, Mac said, as if that was explaining everything. And you've got 4 arms. You're perfect. Let's go, Squidward. I'm a cephalopod descendant, not a... Just move it, Mac barked. The playfulness vanished from his voice, replaced by a sudden, sharp, commanding tone that triggered a primal flight response in Xyloph's brain. He unbuckled his harness. He didn't want to go. Every cell in his body screamed that this was wrong, that it was suicide. But the human was already moving, marching toward the lift with smooth strides of a soldier marching to war, swinging his club. Xyloph followed him, because the only thing scarier than the star below them was the human in front of him. The air grew hotter as they descended. The Aethelgard groaned around them, the metal protesting the gravitational tides. The smooth, sterile corridors of the upper decks gave way to the industrial gloom of the engineering sublevels. Mac was busy rummaging through a locker. He pulled out a roll of silver adhesive fabric, duct tape he called it, and began wrapping it around the joints of his suit. What are you doing? Xyloph asked, his voice trembling. Sealing the suit, Mac mumbled, biting off a piece of tape with his teeth. These standard issue suits are rated for vacuum, not for the heat we're about to walk into. This helps. A little. That is fabric tape, Xyloph pointed out, watching with morbid fascination. It won't stop gamma radiation. It'll stop the sweat from fogging my visor, Mac said. He tossed a roll to the navigator. Tape your cuffs. If you pass out from the heat, I'm not carrying you back. Xyloph applied the tape, his hands shaking so badly he nearly stuck his manipulators together. He felt ridiculous. He was a high-ranking officer of the fleet, wrapped in silver adhesive like a broken cargo crate. Mac, please explain the plan again. Savant said the injectors are fused at the molecular level. Savant is a drama queen, Mac grunted. He stood up, looking like a silver mummy wrapped in refuse. He picked up the pipe wrench and hefted it. The injectors are basically just plungers. Big, fancy, quantum plungers. When the ion surge hit, the metal expanded and got stuck in the housing. The computer sees stuck and thinks broken. I see stuck and think needs a nudge. And the radiation will be fast. And the heat will be sweaty. Mac walked to the heavy blast door of the main engine room. A red light rotated above it. The warning signs were explicitly clear in multiple languages. Lethal danger. Do not enter. Mac hit the manual release. The hydraulics hissed, sounding like a dying beast. A wave of heat hit them instantly, hot enough to trigger the thermal warning alarms in Xyloph's suit. The air shimmered. Inside, the massive fusion core pulsed with a terrifying, unstable violet light. The sound was deafening, a roar of contained power that shook Xyloph's very bones. "All right, Xyloph," Mac shouted over the roar, his voice cracking through the comms. "Stay behind the blast shield. Shine the light on the manifold cap. If you see me catch on fire, don't panic. Just spray me with the foam." "If you what?" Xyloph shrieked, but Mac was already running. He ran straight into the violet glare, into the zone that the safety manuals described as instant genetic dissolution. Headbanging to his music, with a pipe wrench raised high above his head like a barbarian axe, Xyloph watched him go. Humans were not brave, he decided. Bravery implied overcoming fear. Humans were simply too insane to process the concept of impossible. Xyloph scrambled behind the designated blast shield, a slab of dense tungsten meant to protect maintenance drones, not biological life forms. He peeked over the edge, activating the heavy-duty industrial loom caster Mac had shoved into his lower hands. The beam cut through the smoky haze of the engine room, illuminating the chaos. The engine core was a monstrosity of spinning rings and pulsating light. Usually it was a calm blue, but now it was an angry, violent violet, spitting arcs of plasma that scorched the floor plating. And there, climbing the maintenance ladder right next to the exposed plasma vents, was Mac. "Shine it higher," Mac's voice crackled over the comms, distorted by the radiation interference. "I can't see the valve nut." Xyloph adjusted the beam, his hands shaking. "Mac, the dosimeter on my suit is red. We are taking lethal doses." "Walk it off," Mac yelled back. He reached the top of the platform, straddling the primary injector housing like he was riding a wild animal. The housing was vibrating so violently that Xyloph could see Mac's teeth chattering inside his helmet. The human braced his legs against the scalding metal, raised the pipe wrench, and clamped it onto a bolt the size of a dinner plate. "Savant," Mac screamed, "give me a countdown to the pulse cycle." "Warning," the AI replied, its voice glitching. "Pulse cycle unstable. Detonation imminent. In 3, 2, now," Mac shouted. He didn't pull the wrench. He didn't twist it. He stood up on the housing, raised his boot, and kicked the handle of the wrench with the force of a hydraulic press. Clang! The sound rang out over the roar of the engine. Nothing happened. "Hit it again," Mac yelled to himself. He stomped on the wrench again. Clang! "Mac," Xyloph screamed. "The structural integrity shields are failing." "One more," Mac roared. He grabbed the railing, jumped into the air, and came down on the wrench handle with both feet. Crack! A sound like a breaking bone echoed through the chamber. The bolt turned a quarter of an inch. Suddenly, the violet light of the core flickered. The screaming whine of the engine dropped an octave. The stuck plunger slammed downward with a mechanical thud that knocked Mac off his feet. "Injectors are cycling," Mac yelled, scrambling backward as a jet of superheated steam erupted from the valve he had just abused. "Xyloph, get back to the lift. Run!" Xyloph didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled on all 6 limbs, skittering across the floor like a terrified crab. Mac was right behind him, sliding down the ladder and sprinting through the heat haze. They dove through the blast doors just as the engine roared to life. It wasn't the clean, smooth hum of a healthy engine. It was a dirty, coughing, sputtering roar, like a beast waking up angry. Mac hit the seal button. The doors slammed shut, muffling the noise. They lay on the cool metal floor of the antechamber, panting. Xyloph checked his suit diagnostics. He had absorbed enough radiation to sterilize a small colony of bacteria, but he was alive. Xyloph gasped for air. "Did you fix it?" Mac sat up, peeling a strip of melted duct tape off his visor. He checked his wrist comp. "I didn't fix it. I just made it angry enough to work for a few minutes." "A few minutes?" "Yeah," Mac said, standing up and offering a hand to the alien. "Enough time to do something stupid." When they returned to the bridge, the silence was gone. The alarms were blaring. "Captain," Mac shouted, striding toward the helm. "The engines are hot. You've got about 3 minutes of thrust before the injectors melt for good." Captain H'Riss looked at the human as if he were a ghost. You fixed it?" "I percussed it," Mac corrected. "But listen to me. We don't have enough thrust to fly away from the star. The gravity is too strong now." "Then we're dead," Plith whimpered. "No," Mac said, his eyes scanning the navigation console. Xyloph, pull up the solar wind charts. Look at the coronal mass ejections. Xyloph, his hands still trembling, manipulated the hologram. There's a massive solar flare erupting on the southern quadrant of the star. It's a Class X ejection. Exactly. Mac pointed at the terrifying wall of fire on the screen. We can't fly out, but we can surf. Surf? H'Riss asked. We fly down, Mac said, tracing a line on the screen that made Xyloph's stomach turn. We dive into the gravity well, pick up speed, and hit the edge of the solar flare. The pressure wave from the explosion will catch the shields. If we angle the ship right, it'll launch us out of the system like a spitball. That is, Xyloph stammered, that requires piloting skills beyond any computer. Savant can't calculate chaos variables like a solar flare in real time. Savant isn't driving, Mac said. He reached over and pulled the manual control yoke out of the captain's console. I am. You? H'Riss stared. You're a mechanic. You drive hover trucks. I play a lot of flight sims, Mac said, cracking his knuckles. And I've got the highest score on Galaxy Drifter. Everyone strap in. It's gonna get bumpy. The human sat in the captain's chair. He didn't look like a Starfleet officer. He looked like a grease-stained madman. He plugged his music player into the ship's comms system. Savant, route all power to the rear shields. Cut life support to 50% and turn the volume up. The bridge speakers crackled. A heavy, driving bass line kicked in. Can You Feel My Heart by Bring Me the Horizon began to blast at maximum volume. Mac grabbed the yoke. Alright, boys. Let's see if this tub can drift. He slammed the throttle forward. The Aethelgard didn't turn away from the star. It dove straight into it. The universe was screaming. To Xyloph, the scream was a cacophony of alarms. Hull integrity warnings, thermal overload sirens, and the terrified prayers of the bridge crew. But mostly, the scream was Oliver Sykes of Bring Me the Horizon, blasting through the ship's comms at a decibel level that vibrated the fillings in Xyloph's teeth. The main view screen was no longer showing stars. It was showing a wall of boiling, roiling plasma. They were so close to the star that the optical sensors were auto-dimming to prevent the crew from going blind, turning the raging inferno into a terrifying grayscale ocean of fire, and Mac was driving straight into it. Hold on, Mac yelled, his voice barely audible over the music. Here comes the drop. The human's hands flew across the manual yoke. He wasn't checking the sensor readouts. He wasn't looking at the math. He was looking at the fire, his head bobbing slightly to the rhythm of the breakdown. Mac, Captain H'Riss shrieked, clutching his armrest so hard his claws punctured the leather. We are too steep. The shields will not hold. Shields are for wussies, Mac yelled back, grinning like a demon. We need speed. The Aethelgard shuddered violently. A panel on the wall exploded in a shower of sparks. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making Xyloph's stomach lurch into his throat. Savant, Mac barked. Drop the portside anchor. Full drag. That is suicidal, the AI protested, its voice modulating with electronic panic. Deploying a drag anchor at this velocity will shear the ship in half. Do it! The ship jerked. It felt as though a giant hand had grabbed the left side of the vessel. The nose of the massive cruiser whipped around violently. The Aethelgard was no longer flying forward. It was flying sideways, drifting across the upper atmosphere of the star like a hover car on an icy road. Xyloph watched the screen in horror. They were skimming the surface of the star, the hull screaming as it carved through the outer corona. The heat inside the bridge spiked. Xyloph could smell burning plastic. There! Mac pointed a shaking finger at the screen. Ahead of them, a mountain of fire was rising, the solar flare. It was a tsunami of magnetic energy and superheated plasma, curling upward into the void, thousands of kilometers high. Any sane species would have fired retro rockets to avoid it. Mac slammed the throttle forward. Punch it! He turned the ship directly into the base of the wave. The music reached its crescendo. The ship hit the magnetic incline. For a moment, physics seemed to give up. The massive diplomatic cruiser didn't crash. It climbed. It rode the magnetic field lines up the side of the flare, accelerating with the violence of a cannon shot. Come on, baby, Mac roared, wrestling with the yoke, his muscles straining against the G-force. Fly, fly, you piece of junk. The ship reached the crest of the flare. The explosion caught them. The world turned white. There was no sound. The impact was too loud for auditory processing. Xyloph felt his consciousness detach from his body. He saw the universe spin. He felt his internal organs compress into a singularity. He felt the Aethelgard groan, bend, and then snap free. The white faded to black. The roaring fire was gone. The G-forces vanished, leaving them floating in a sudden, jarring weightlessness of a failed gravity generator. Silence returned to the bridge. The music had cut out when the speakers blew. Xyloph opened his eyes. He was floating upside down, held in place only by his harness. Smoke filled the air. The emergency lights bathed the bridge in a pulsing, bloody red. Status, Captain H'Riss croaked in the darkness. Alive, Plith whispered, sounding surprised. Alive, Xyloph confirmed, checking his limbs. Bruised, terrified, but alive. Savant? The captain asked. System rebooting. The AI's voice was glitchy and slow. Hull integrity, 14%. Main engines, offline. Shields, non-existent. Current velocity, 90% light speed. We have exited the gravity well. We are currently drifting in deep space. A heavy, metallic clink echoed from the pilot's chair. Mac unbuckled his harness and floated upward. He wiped a streak of soot from his forehead. He looked at the console, which was smoking and sparking. He reached out and tapped the dashboard affectionately. Good girl, he whispered to the ship. He turned to the crew, floating in zero-G, looking for all the galaxy like a scruffy, dirty deity of chaos. Anyone got a snack? Mac asked. Drifting makes me hungry. The rescue fleet arrived 3 cycles later. They found the Aethelgard drifting in the void, a blackened, twisted husk of metal. The heat shielding had been stripped away entirely. The port side was hanging by a few cables. The hull looked as though it had been chewed by a cosmic beast. When the rescue team boarded, they expected to find corpses. Instead, they found the crew sitting in the mess hall, eating emergency rations by the light of glow sticks. I sat with the lead investigator, a rigorous and logic-bound Vulcanoid named Sub-Commander Tlarn. He was reviewing the flight data recorder. His expression had been frozen in a mask of disbelief for the last hour. This data is corrupted, Tlarn said, tapping the data slate. It shows the vessel performing a high-angle atmospheric drift maneuver inside a Class X solar flare. Correct, I said, sipping my tea. That is aerodynamically impossible for a vessel of this tonnage, Tlarn stated. The structural stress alone should have disintegrated the frame. It nearly did, I agreed. We lost decks 9 through 12. And the engine logs, Tlarn continued, his eye twitching slightly. They indicate that the primary fuel injectors were manually activated via impact trauma? Percussive maintenance, I corrected him. The human Mac hit them with a wrench. Tlarn stared at me. He hit a quantum fusion drive with a wrench. Twice, I added. He had to hit it twice. Tlarn set the slate down. He looked across the mess hall. The human Mac was sitting at a table with Captain H'Riss. The captain, a noble and high-ranking diplomat, was listening intently as Mac explained the nuances of heavy metal music, using a fork and a ration tin to demonstrate a blast beat. High exemplar, Tlarn said quietly. We have run psychological simulations on the human species. We've classified them as a Class 3 risk due to aggression. But this, he gestured to the data slate, this suggests they do not operate on risk assessment at all. They operate on spite, I finished for him, and boredom. I looked at Mac. He was laughing now, clapping the captain on the back. He didn't look like a hero. He didn't look like a genius. He looked like a tired mechanic who just wanted to go home. But I knew the truth now. The galaxy is filled with ancient, powerful creatures. We have telepaths, hive minds, and biological immortals. We pride ourselves on our logic, our science, and our safety. But when the universe decides to kill you, when the math says 0 and the darkness is closing in, you don't want a scientist. You don't want a diplomat. You want a human with a pipe wrench, a bad idea, and a loud soundtrack. Because logic will tell you how you're gonna die, but a human will laugh, kick the laws of physics in the teeth, and tell death to wait its turn. I stood up and walked over to Mac's table. Mac, I said. He looked up, a noodle hanging from his mouth. Hey, Squidward, what's up? They gonna tow us home? Yes, I said. I reached into my uniform pocket and pulled out the heavy, ferrous alloy pipe wrench. I had retrieved it from the engine room before we evacuated. The handle was wrapped from the heat, and the head was cracked. I placed it on the table in front of him. "You drop this," I said. Mac looked at the wrench, then up at me. He grinned. "Thanks, buddy. Might need it later." The coffee machine in the rescue ship is making a weird noise. Captain H'Riss and I exchanged a look of pure terror. "I will alert the rescue crew," the captain said, standing up immediately. "We cannot allow him near the coffee machine." "Run," I advised. As we hurried away, I heard Mac tapping the wrench against the table, humming the opening riff of that terrible, wonderful song, "Can You Feel My Heart?" Yes, human, I believe I finally can.